registered dietitian and a certified specialist in oncology nutrition. I cover inpatients here at Fox Chase Cancer Center, but today we'll be discussing healthful eating habits for before, during, and after any kind of cancer diagnosis and cancer treatment. I'll start with an overview. We'll review nutrition guidelines. I'll talk mostly about following more of a plant-based diet, as well as recommendations for fruits and vegetables, whole grains, meats, and at the end I'll talk more about how to implement these recommendations into your lifestyle. So this is a very busy graphic, but it's from the American Institute for Cancer Research. This is an organization that compiles guidelines. They analyze worldwide research on how nutrition, diet, and physical activity all affect cancer risk and cancer survival. And you'll see that these are cancer prevention recommendations. However, it's recommended that cancer survivors also follow these recommendations. And as we learned earlier, you are a cancer survivor from day one of diagnosis. So if you can kind of try to optimize your nutrition as best as possible, it will help you during treatment and after treatment as well. Some things that we'll focus on today are eating a diet that's rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans. We're going to want to limit our consumption of red and processed meats, as well as limiting our consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages, and limiting our consumption of fast foods and highly processed foods. You'll see that there are other recommendations. One of the overarching recommendations from the American Institute for Cancer Research is that we try our best to achieve and maintain a healthy weight, and following these dietary guidelines will help to achieve that overarching goal. So first, I'll talk mostly about following more of a plant-based diet, or you'll see that I wrote a lifestyle. I don't really like the term diet at all because sometimes it has a negative connotation. We want to make these changes to our lifestyle and not necessarily think of being on a diet. And what does plant-based mean? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're a vegetarian or that you're eliminating all animal products. It's really just making the focus the plant foods. And what are plant foods? Things like vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, and nuts. And these foods are high in vitamins and minerals, and you might hear the term phytonutrients or phytochemicals, which are really components of fruits and vegetables. They help to give them their vibrant colors, and they also have benefits for us and have shown to be beneficial in reducing cancer risk. So we want to make the focus on increasing our consumption of these whole plant-based foods and choosing minimally processed foods as well. And I'll start with just a visual aid. I think they always help us to kind of see what we have to do. But this is from the USDA. It's the My Plate, which you may have seen on some food packages. It's the USDA's visual aid to help Americans kind of meet these recommendations. And you'll see here half of our plate is fruits and vegetables. A recommendation is also to make half of our grains whole grains. You'll see protein here and dairy as well. But this is just a visual aid. It doesn't really explain everything to us, and I have another aid that I like even a little bit more. It has more detail and more recommendations on how we can change our diet to be more healthful. And this actually comes from Harvard. It's called Harvard's Healthy Eating Plate, and it's very similar to the USDA My Plate. However, it puts more emphasis on whole grains and healthy proteins, so things like fish, poultry, beans, nuts. And it does represent our whole plate, but it also includes drinking more water and choosing healthy oils. And just like the My Plate, there is half of our plate being fruits and vegetables. So those are the recommendations that we'll talk about next. the American Cancer Society actually puts out a recommendation that we consume 2.5 cups of fruits and vegetables each day. So what does that really mean? What are 2.5 cups of fruits and vegetables? If you look to the choosemyplate.gov, that's the USDA's website, they have a lot of great resources for you, especially when it comes to serving sizes of foods. So if you look about the size of my fist, an apple, that would be the equivalent of 1 cup. Or you could consume 1 large bell pepper would be 1 cup equivalent of a vegetable. When we think of something like spinach that shrinks down when it cooks, 2 cups of raw spinach would be a 1 cup equivalent. However, it cooks down to about 1 cup. And we want to aim to meet this 2.5 cups each day. And you'll see that I wrote, color your plate the color of the rainbow. And that is to emphasize the importance of the variety of fruits and vegetables that we're consuming as well. The different colors of the different fruits and vegetables are going to provide us with different compounds. You may have heard that tomatoes and watermelon provide us with the compound lycopene, which has been shown to reduce different cancer rates. Similarly, orange and yellow fruits and vegetables, things like carrots, orange peppers, yellow peppers, will provide us with different compounds like carotenoids. And these are those phytonutrients that you hear a lot of buzz about in the news that are so beneficial for us. And now the recommendations for things like breads and grains and cereals. The recommendation is that we always choose whole grains whenever possible. And what is a whole grain? You might hear the term whole grain and refined grains, and we might not really know what that means. So that's why I really like this graphic. It shows the whole grain, which contains the bran and the germ, and these are the parts that are stripped away during any kind of food processing to reveal just the refined grain. And what that refined grain is it's just a starchy carbohydrate. So it's lacking the vitamins and the minerals of the whole grains. So that's why the recommendation is to choose whole grains whenever possible. And that means things like whole grain bread, brown rice, oatmeal, whole grain pastas are also available. But maybe try some different things. There's a variety of what you might see advertised as ancient grains now available in food stores very readily, things like quinoa and farro. These are all whole grains that are going to provide our bodies with vitamins and minerals as well. And then next we'll talk a little bit about animal products. So following more of a plant-based diet or lifestyle is going to reduce our intake of animal products. We want to, the American Institute for Cancer Research makes the recommendation that we avoid processed meats as best as we can. It's because these are highly processed foods. They contain things like nitrates, which have been shown in research to actually promote and stimulate the growth of other cancers like colorectal cancer. So we want to avoid that at all costs. So this means things like bacon and ham, sausages. These are the processed meats that we want to try to limit and reduce our intake of. And if you do eat red meat, there is a recommendation that we're consuming 12 to 18 ounces of red meat per week. So what does that mean, 12 to 18 ounces? If we think of a serving size of meat being about the size of a deck of cards, that's about 3 ounces. So I know a lot of our portion sizes might not be that small, so it's really important to pay attention to our portion sizes, but also know that we want to just limit our intake of overall consumption of the red meats. And while we're reducing the consumption of these types of meats, how are we going to meet our protein needs? Protein is very important to maintain our muscle mass, maintain our strength, and it's really the building block of most of our cells in our bodies. So instead we can choose lean, healthful sources like nuts, beans, fish, poultry, and even low-fat dairy is going to provide us with a good source of protein. And you'll see this is just a graphic from the American Institute of Cancer Research, limiting to 3 portions of red meat per week. and avoiding those processed meats as best as you can. And now recommendations when it comes to things like fats, sugar, salt. We always hear the terms following a low-fat diet or limiting our fat intake, and that's simply to reduce our calorie intake and really aim at maintaining a healthy weight. But really more of the focus now is shifting our intake from saturated fats, the unhealthy fats, to more of the healthy fats, the unsaturated fats. And if we're reducing our intake of meats and animal products, we're already reducing our intake of these unhealthy fats. And if we want to include even more of the healthful unsaturated fats, we can include things like salmon and tuna, choose things like walnuts, canola oil, olive oil. These are sources of these healthy fats that we can try to incorporate into our diet. And we want to reduce our consumption of added sugars. Now the FDA has put out a new nutrition facts food label, which actually includes an added sugar section. We know that fruits naturally contain sugars, and they're the more healthful sugars to be consuming because you're eating them in the fruit form. You're getting fiber, vitamins, and minerals as well. But we want to reduce our intake of added sugars. So a large amount of our added sugars comes from things like sodas or sweetened teas, candies and cookies. These types of things we want to reduce our intake of. And the guidelines are that we're consuming about less than 50 grams of added sugar per day. So like I said, this is something that's now becoming available on food labels. So you can kind of monitor your intake. But if you are somebody that always reaches out for a soda or reaches out for a sweetened beverage that has added sugar, that's one easy way to reduce your intake of added sugars in a day. And instead, we can replace them with flavored waters, unsweetened teas, and try your best not to be overwhelmed when it comes to making these dietary changes and these lifestyle changes. You want to aim to make one change at a time. These are the changes that will stick with you and that will lead to a change in your overall lifestyle. And that's really the goal here. So how do we make these changes? I just gave you a whole lot of information about recommendations from great organizations like the American Cancer Society, as well as the American Institute for Cancer Research. But how do we make these changes into our actual daily lives? Something that you might hear is very trendy or is very buzzworthy is something called Meatless Monday. So that's one way that you can change one day of the week where you don't consume meats, and that's going to help to reduce your intake of those processed meats, the red meat as well. And I'll kind of go into a sample of a day using different recipes to achieve that. And if you're on a budget like I am, we're always conscious of what we're spending in the grocery stores. And if we're reducing our intake of meats, we're going to reduce our grocery costs greatly, which is also great. And some things that I always like to keep on hand are beans and peanut butter, brown rice. I always like to keep these in the pantry. They're an easy, inexpensive way to make some of these changes to include more whole grains in our diets. And as a patient, as a caregiver, as anybody that's working, we're short on time. We don't have time to make elaborate meals. And you don't need the time to make any kind of elaborate meal to implement these lifestyle changes into your lives. There's convenient ways to do so. We can use frozen or canned vegetables. We do really want to be cautious and read the label and make sure that we're avoiding anything that has any kind of sauces or added sugars or added salt. So when you're reading the food labels, try your best to make sure that the only thing in those cans is those vegetables. And there's also things like frozen brown rice and frozen quinoa available, something that's convenient for you to include more whole grains in your diet. And again, you just really want to read those food labels and make sure that there's not added ingredients that we don't really want to be consuming, added sugars, added salts. And another easy way, if we're short on time, especially during the busy hustle bustle of the work week, is trying to prepare things in advance so that you have things on hand. It will make it easier for you to consume a healthy meal when you're short on time after work or in between appointments. And so now I'll talk a little bit more about that Meatless Monday. How are we going to reduce our consumption of meat in one day? So I just have an example of a day where you eat a breakfast, a snack, a lunch, and a dinner, and I know that everybody's day is a little bit different, and you might not be able to follow this exactly, but like I said, it's just an example, just a way to increase our consumption of those whole grains, make sure that we're consuming 2.5 cups of fruits and vegetables each day, and limiting our intake of red and processed meats. So we start with something like oats in the morning, maybe paired with some fruit, like a 1/2 cup of blueberries or 1 small apple. And then maybe we'll have a mid-morning or a late afternoon snack where we're reaching for a handful of nuts. Or maybe we're having a piece of fruit with some peanut butter. Just a way to increase our consumption of healthier fats and fruits and vegetables as well. And then at lunchtime, if we try to incorporate more greens, we're going to increase our consumption of vegetables and maybe top them with some walnuts so that we're getting those healthy fats. And then at dinner time, one of my favorites actually is a macaroni and cheese that's made with cheese sauce that's actually based in cashews. So we're getting healthy fats and protein and using a whole grain pasta to get our whole grains in. And I just included 2 different recipes here. So this is something that I actually do quite often, especially during the work week. Never in my younger years was I one to eat oatmeal. I actually despised it. But I said, you know what, this is an easy way for me to make sure that I'm getting a good breakfast in the morning. And it really only takes 5 minutes the day before. You have your ingredients, oats. Use low-fat milk or a milk alternative, add some kind of seeds or nuts or peanut butter, really whatever you like to flavor it to your liking. You mix it all in a container, put it in the refrigerator overnight. The next morning, it's ready for you to eat. It's an easy, convenient meal to get in some whole grains. And then this is the recipe. This is actually something that I make quite often, and it is the macaroni and cheese that's made with a cashew cheese sauce. This does require a little bit more preparation, which is really just soaking the cashews to make them soft so that we can blend them into a sauce. And then if you put this over a whole grain pasta, whether it's whole wheat pasta or brown rice pasta, it's just another way that we can meet our recommendation for whole grains. And I know that it might be overwhelming to some of us to try to make some of these changes or to even meet any of these guidelines at all. So while you're a patient here at Fox Chase Cancer Center, you have the ability to meet with an outpatient dietitian. Here, I have some pamphlets in the back about information for scheduling that appointment. But at any point during or after your treatment, you feel that you're struggling to meet your nutrition needs, you can call to schedule an appointment to meet with a dietitian, and we'll sit with you one-on-one, go over your life, your schedule, and help you to meet your nutrition needs so that you maintain a healthy life and that you're feeling well during and after treatment. These are just some of the references and resources that I've used and that are great even for you to use for resources. If you're looking for more recipes or meal suggestions, the American Institute for Cancer Research has a great website, as well as the American Cancer Society. They have a large compilation of different recipes that are all geared towards these guidelines. So I believe that we'll be taking questions at the end, but I really do just want to thank you all for your attention, and I hope you learned a little bit this morning.